My son brought a moving truck to my house, not after I died, not after I moved out, while I was still alive, still paying the bills, still sleeping in my own bed. He told the movers I'd already signed everything, said the house was being sold, said it was all handled. I stood there watching strangers carry my life away, and that's when something inside me finally settled. They thought I was confused. They thought I was weak. They had no idea what I'd already done in silence. Before I go any further, let me slow this down for a moment. Stories like this don't come out easily. They sit with you for years before you ever say them out loud. If you're listening right now, maybe you've lived a long life too. Maybe you've learned that the hardest lessons often come through the people we trusted most. If that's you, I'm glad you're here. You don't have to agree with everything I did. You don't even have to like it. Just listen. And if these stories keep you company, if they remind you that you're not invisible, I'd be grateful if you subscribed and shared where you're listening from. All right, let me tell you how this really began. I'm 70 years old now. Some mornings my knees wake me before the sun does. They don't hurt exactly. They just remind me where I've been. I sit on the edge of the bed for a minute. Let my feet find the floor. Take a breath. Then I stand. I don't rush anymore. Rushing belongs to younger men. Men who still think speed proves something. My house sits at the end of a gravel road, about 40 minutes from the nearest town. If you drive too fast, you'll miss it. White siding, peeling paint, a porch that creaks if you step too hard on the left board. That board's been loose for years. I keep meaning to fix it, but somehow I like knowing it's there. It announces you before you arrive. Inside, everything is familiar. The kettle on the stove, the chipped mug with the faded blue line, the kitchen table where the sun lands just right around 8. I put the kettle on and let it whistle longer than I should. Old habit. The sound fills the house and makes it feel awake. I sit at the table and watch the light move across the floor. That light tells me more about the day than the radio ever could. If it's soft, I take my time. If it's sharp, I know it's going to be a long one. I keep my routines simple. Feed the chickens, check the fence line, sweep the porch, even when it doesn't need it. You do something long enough, it starts doing something back for you. It reminds you who you are when the world keeps changing. My son, Mark, used to tease me about that. "Dad," he'd say, laughing, "you treat that place like it's alive." Maybe I do. After all these years, it kind of is. Mark is 43 now, tall, broad shoulders, built a lot like I was at his age, before time started negotiating with my joints. He lives in the city with his wife, Lydia, and their 2 kids. They come out about once a month, sometimes less. Life gets busy. I understand that. When they visit, I don't make a fuss. I cook too much anyway. Chili, cornbread, whatever's easy on my hands and stretches well. The kids run through the house like it belongs to them. I let them. I remember being small once. Lydia has always been polite, careful with her words, smiles often, asks how my blood pressure is, if I'm sleeping okay. "You shouldn't be lifting that," she'll say. Or, "Have you thought about getting some help around here?" I usually shrug. Tell her I'm fine, because most days I am. Truth is, I'm proud of managing on my own. Pride gets a bad reputation, but sometimes it's just self-respect wearing an old coat. There was a time I didn't think I'd ever own a place like this. That was a long time ago, back when Mark was 5. That was the year his mother left. She packed up one afternoon and didn't come back. No note, no warning, just silence. I didn't have time to fall apart. A little boy needed dinner, shoes that fit, someone to tell him things would be okay, even when I wasn't sure they would be. I worked wherever they'd take me. construction in the mornings, warehouse shifts at night, weekends hauling scrap for extra cash. I learned how to sleep sitting up, how to stretch a pot of soup for days, how to smile while running on fumes. I promised myself one thing back then, that no one would ever take our home away again. This house came years later, after saving change in jars, after saying no to anything that wasn't essential, after choosing stability over comfort again and again. I signed the papers at 52. My hand shook so badly the clerk offered me water, not from doubt, from relief. Mark was already grown, but he helped me paint the walls that first summer, got more paint on himself than the brush. We laughed. It felt like a second beginning. That's why I kept the house just the way it was. The coffee table with the nicked leg, the chairs I refinished myself, the photos that still smell faintly of dust and polish. To me, it wasn't clutter. It was evidence. Lately, though, things had felt slightly off. Nothing dramatic, just small comments. "That drive is getting harder for you," Mark said once. "Ever think about moving closer?" I told him I liked the quiet. One afternoon, Lydia brought paperwork. "Medical forms," she said. "Just in case." I was tired that day. My hands hurt. She spoke quickly. I trusted her. I signed where she pointed. That night, I sat at the table longer than usual. The house felt quieter. Not lonely, just waiting. I didn't know it then, but that calm life I'd built so carefully, that quiet evening at the table, was the last real peace I'd feel for a long time. The day everything finally broke open started like any other. I woke before sunrise. Same stiff knees, same slow stretch before standing. I made coffee, drank half of it, then poured the rest down the sink without thinking. I needed feed for the chickens and a refill on my prescriptions. Nothing urgent, just life moving along the way it always had. The drive into town was quiet, radio low, windows cracked open. At the feed store, the clerk asked what he always did. "Still kicking?" I smiled. "Still here." I loaded the bags myself, ignored the ache in my shoulder, drove home slow. Then I turned onto my road, and my mind rejected what it saw. A white moving truck, big, loud, parked right in front of my porch like it belonged there. For a moment I thought I'd taken the wrong turn. Your brain tries to save you before your heart catches up. I slowed down. Gravel popped under the tires. That sound felt too sharp, too final. The truck's back doors were open, wide, waiting. Two men I didn't recognize stepped out of my house, carrying chairs, my chairs, the oak ones I sanded myself late at night, hands sore, radio playing low. I couldn't move. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, watching strangers carry my life out piece by piece like it was inventory. Then I saw Mark, standing on my porch, holding my coffee table like it was his. Behind him stood Lydia, clipboard in hand, pointing inside the house. "Take the bedroom next," she said. Calm, efficient. Something inside me went quiet. Not angry, not loud, quiet. I stepped out of the truck. My legs felt heavy, unfamiliar, like they weren't sure they trusted the ground anymore. "Mark," I said. My voice was thin, but it didn't shake. "What's going on?" He flinched, just a little. "Dad, you weren't supposed to be home yet." That wasn't an answer. I walked closer. A mover adjusted his grip on my lamp, the one my sister gave me before she passed. "Put that down," I said. He froze. When the lamp touched the floor, the shade tilted crooked. That small thing hurt more than it should have. "What are you doing with my things?" I asked. Lydia stepped forward before Mark could speak. Her smile was tight, practiced. "You're taking this the wrong way," she said. "We talked about downsizing." "We didn't," I said. "The house gets quiet sometimes. That's all." She tapped her clipboard. "You signed the authorization." Mark nodded beside her. Still wouldn't meet my eyes. "The buyer wants it cleared by Monday," he added. "We didn't want you overwhelmed." "The buyer," I repeated. "What buyer?" He swallowed. "You remember the papers?" he said. "The medical ones." "You said they were for doctors," I replied. "You didn't read everything carefully," he said. That sentence settled under my skin like ice. I walked past them into the house. My living room looked gutted. Photos gone, books missing. The rug rolled up like it no longer mattered. A mover brushed past me with a box. The label read, "Miscellaneous." That's what my life was now. "Dad, please," Mark said behind me. "Don't make this harder." "I live in every room of this house," I said quietly. "I walk these floors. I sleep under this roof. You don't get to decide it's too much for me." Lydia tried again. "We're not stealing. We're organizing." I looked around. "This isn't organizing," I said. "This is removing." That's when I understood. They weren't helping me move. They were moving me out. I stepped close to Mark, close enough to see the scar above his eyebrow from when he fell off his bike at 8. "Whose idea was this?" I asked softly. His eyes flickered. Guilt showed itself for half a second, then disappeared. "We just want what's best," he said. "No," I replied. "You want what's convenient." The house felt like it was holding its breath. "This ends," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten anyone. But I knew then, with a calm I'd never felt before, I would not stay passive. After they left that afternoon, the house didn't erupt with noise. It didn't echo with shouting. It didn't fall apart dramatically. It just went hollow, the kind of hollow that sneaks up on you, like opening the fridge and forgetting why you're there, like a room that suddenly feels bigger than it should. I stood in the doorway for a long time, long enough for the dust to settle, long enough for the air to cool. I didn't chase them, didn't call out, didn't even lock the door right away. Instead, I walked out back, past the shed that leans a little too much to the right, past the apple tree that never grew straight, no matter how I trimmed it. I rested my hands on the fence and looked out over the field. That view had never failed me before, but that day it felt unfamiliar, like someone had nudged the world just a few inches off center. I traced the grooves in the wood with my thumb. That small, familiar motion pulled me backward. To mornings when Mark was small, sitting at the kitchen table with his legs swinging, asking if we were okay now. I always said yes, even when I didn't know. I thought those years stayed with you, thought sacrifice left a permanent mark. But memory doesn't work that way. A house can hold memories, but it can't make someone keep them. By the time I went back inside, the sun was already low. I poured myself a cup of coffee, set it on the counter, forgot about it. When I found it later, it was cold and untouched. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay there listening to the house settle, the ticks, the pops, the quiet creaks of old wood. I replayed every small moment from the last few months, every offhand comment, every look Lydia gave the place, every time Mark mentioned planning ahead. I'd brushed them aside, because I couldn't imagine my own son hurting me like that. That was the hardest part, not the betrayal itself, but realizing how long I'd protected them from my doubt. Morning came quietly. I fed the chickens on instinct. They pecked around my boots like nothing had changed. Life doesn't wait for heartbreak to pass. Inside, sunlight streamed through the windows and landed on bare patches of wall where frames had been. The living room felt wrong, like a sentence that ended too early. I stood there for a while. Then I went to the kitchen drawer. the one with everything important: bills, receipts, old bank statements, warranties for things I don't even own anymore. Years of scraping by teach you one thing: paper matters. I spread everything across the table, slow, careful. That's when my fingers found the packet Lydia brought weeks earlier, tucked behind an old utility bill, like part of me had hidden it on purpose. I unfolded it. The words blurred at first. Legal language does that, but I forced myself to keep reading, line by line, clause by clause. There it was: a power of attorney, broad, unrestricted, authority over property, transfers, representation. My signature sat at the bottom, shaky, dated the day my knees were flaring and Lydia talked about hospitals and emergencies. Something cold settled into my chest. They hadn't just moved my furniture, they were moving my life. I sat there a long time, hands flat on the table, breathing slow. I didn't cry, not yet. I grabbed my jacket and drove to the county building. The lobby smelled like old coffee and printer ink. A clerk with silver hair greeted me kindly. She typed my name into her computer, paused. "There's a pending transfer request on your property," she said. "Pending," I repeated. "If someone with authority filed it," she said gently. "Yes." The floor felt unsteady. "They were going to sell it," I said out loud. She touched my arm. "I'm sorry. You should speak to an attorney." I walked outside in a fog, sat on a bench beneath an oak tree, watched people pass by, laughing about weekend plans. Meanwhile, my world felt like it was sinking. I didn't go home. I drove 20 miles east to a community legal center I'd passed 100 times without thinking I'd ever need it. That's where I met Daniel Ortiz. Calm voice, steady eyes, the kind of man who listens before he speaks. He read every page, didn't rush. When he looked up, his expression was serious. "This power of attorney is dangerously broad," he said, "and the transfer signature doesn't match your usual writing." Forgery. The word didn't explode, it sank. But then he said something else. "It's not too late." We revoked the document, filed notices, locked everything down. As I left his office, something shifted inside me. Not relief, resolve. I didn't feel angry, I just felt done pretending. That night, back home, I slept for the first time in days. Not because it was over, but because I finally knew what I would do next. I didn't rush after that. Rushing is how mistakes get made, and I'd already trusted too quickly once. The next morning I woke before sunrise, not from worry this time, from clarity. I made coffee, sat at the table, watched the steam rise and fade. Everything looked the same on the outside. That mattered. If Mark or Lydia were watching, I wanted them to see nothing unusual. Just an old man keeping his habits, a quiet house staying quiet. But inside, things were lining up. I started with the papers, every drawer, every folder, every envelope I'd ever saved, bank statements going back years, property tax records, insurance policies, old loan documents I'd forgotten existed. I didn't skim anymore. I read, slowly, carefully. I made notes in the margins, dates, names, details most people overlook. Years of surviving on little teach you how to pay attention. I called Daniel once a day, sometimes to confirm something small, sometimes to ask a question I didn't want to get wrong. He never rushed me, never talked down to me. "Silence helps," he said more than once. "People get careless when they think they've already won." So I stayed silent. I didn't call Mark, didn't answer his messages either. There were a few, short, carefully worded. "Dad, let's talk. This doesn't need to get complicated. We're just trying to help." I let them sit unanswered. Instead, I drove to the bank. Not the one in town, the one 2 counties over, the kind of place with thick carpet and chairs that feel heavier than they look. A young man in a gray suit sat across from me. He spoke quickly at first, then slowed down when he realized I was listening closely. We went through everything: accounts locked, authorizations removed, new passwords created. I changed things I'd had the same way for decades, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. I wasn't embarrassed. That surprised me. For the first time, I understood something clearly. Asking questions isn't weakness, it's ownership. From there, I updated my will. Clear language, clean intent. I didn't remove Mark entirely. That wasn't the point. This wasn't punishment. It was boundaries. Daniel filed notices with the county, formal ones, the kind that stop everything cold. No property transfer without my physical presence, no signatures accepted without verification, no authority recognized without renewed consent. Each document felt like setting another stone in place. At night, I sat at my desk by the window, lamp low, house quiet. I listened to the wind move through the trees, the familiar creaks of old wood. I replayed the day with the moving truck, not to reopen the wound, to understand it, where Mark stood, how Lydia spoke, what they assumed I'd do. They expected confusion, fear, compliance. They expected me to shrink. People mistake age for surrender. They think years wear you down instead of teaching you how to stand. That's when the title of this story started circling in my mind. My son tried to sell my home using medical papers. Every time the thought surfaced, it didn't make me angry anymore. It made me focused. This wasn't revenge fueled by rage. It was correction, a course adjustment. I coordinated quietly with the county, with law enforcement. No drama, no threats, just timing. Daniel warned me, "They'll try again." And I believed him. So I waited. Waiting strips away panic if you let it. Days passed, then a week. The house stayed quiet. Too quiet. That's how I knew. They thought the silence meant surrender. They were wrong. When Daniel finally called and said, "Everything's in place," I didn't feel excitement. I felt steady. The stage was set. All I had to do now was let them come back and finish what they started. The morning they came back felt different from the others, not louder, not heavier, just settled. I woke before sunrise again, but this time I didn't lie there thinking. I stood up right away. I made coffee, the same way I always do, measured, unrushed. I stood at the kitchen window and watched the fog lift off the field. The chickens were already awake, moving around like nothing important was about to happen. That comforted me more than it should have. I carried my mug out to the porch and sat down. Didn't drink it right away, just held it, let the warmth sink into my hands. I heard the truck before I saw it. That low, familiar rumble on gravel, the sound that had stolen my breath the first time. This time, it didn't. The white moving truck rolled in slowly. Same size, same company logo. Mark's pickup followed behind it. Lydia's car came last. They stepped out confident. Too confident. Mark walked ahead of the others, his face already arranged into that careful expression, the one that pretends everything is reasonable. "Dad," he said gently, "we really need to get this done today." I took a sip of my coffee then. Finally. "There is no buyer," I said. The words were calm, almost casual. Mark blinked. Once, twice. Lydia laughed. Short, sharp. "Please," she said. "We don't have time for this." That's when Daniel stepped into view. He came from the side of the barn, hands relaxed at his sides. No rush, no show. 2 deputies followed him. They didn't speak right away. They didn't need to. The change in Lydia's face was immediate. Confusion first, then fear. Mark turned toward me slowly. really looked at me this time. "Dad, what's this?" he asked. I didn't answer. Daniel did. "The power of attorney has been formally revoked," he said. "The county has frozen all transfer activity on this property. And there's an active investigation into attempted real estate fraud and forgery." Each sentence landed carefully, like a stone placed where it couldn't be ignored. Lydia opened her mouth, closed it again. One of the deputies stepped forward. "Mr. and Mrs. Coleman," he said, "we're going to need you to step away from the property." "This is a misunderstanding," Lydia said quickly. Her voice had lost its polish. The deputy didn't argue. He didn't need to. Mark's shoulders sagged, just slightly, like something heavy finally settled on them. He looked at the ground, then back at me. "Dad, we didn't mean—" I raised my hand. I didn't want the rest of that sentence. Intentions don't undo actions. "You meant enough to try," I said quietly. "That's what matters." The movers shifted uncomfortably. No one met anyone else's eyes. The deputies guided Mark and Lydia back toward their vehicles. Lydia whispered something sharp under her breath. Mark didn't say another word. He kept his eyes on the gravel. When their cars disappeared down the road, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was clean, earned. The movers packed up without speaking. The truck rolled away. Dust settled back where it belonged. Daniel nodded once, a small gesture. Then he left too. I stood alone on the porch for a while, long enough for the sun to clear the trees, long enough to feel my shoulders drop. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel cruel. I felt finished. Sometimes the loudest moment in life isn't a shout. It's the moment you realize no one else is holding the pen anymore. The days that followed were quiet again, but not the kind of quiet that presses on your chest. This one settled. I went back to my routines, not because I needed them to feel normal, but because they felt right. I fixed the loose hinge on the pantry door. Finally. It took me all of 10 minutes. I don't know why I waited so long. I watered the patch of ground behind the shed, sat on the porch at dusk, watched the light stretch across the field, then slowly disappear. The house felt like mine again, not because it had almost been taken, but because I had chosen to stand still inside it. Trust takes longer to return. I won't pretend otherwise. Some mornings I still reach for the phone when I think of Mark. Then I stop. Not out of anger, out of clarity. Love doesn't mean surrender, and age doesn't mean permission. For a long time I thought being a good father meant stepping back, letting him lead, letting him decide what was best. But there's a line between support and erasure. I learned that late in life, and just in time. When I look back now, on the moving truck, the forged papers, the long silence that followed, I don't feel proud. I feel intact. My son tried to sell my home using medical papers. That sentence still carries weight, but it no longer owns me. What I reclaimed wasn't just property. It wasn't just walls and land. It was my voice. It was the right to say no without explaining myself, the right to read every line, the right to stand my ground quietly. Some people think justice has to be loud, public, fast. I don't believe that anymore. Sometimes justice is slow, measured, patient. Sometimes it's just being able to sit in your own chair at the end of the day and know no one else is making decisions for you. If there's anything I hope you take from my story, it's this. Respect doesn't disappear when it's thrown away. It waits, quietly. And when you're ready to reclaim it, it comes back with peace instead of noise. At my age, that peace is worth more than anything anyone could ever try to take from me. Would you have done the same in my place? I'd really like to know. And if these stories keep you company, if they remind you that your voice still matters, I'd be grateful if you stayed and listened to the next one.